One of the more concerning sentiments I've heard recently is a hope that the new game is realistic or historically accurate. The assumption made here is that a game which is not realistic or historically accurate is somehow worse than one that is more realistic. I will go into depth into this concept later with the video, but if you want the rundown now, games need to be fun. They don't inherently need to be realistic or historically accurate. Now, part of fun can come from immersion, and by extension role-playing as your country in EU4, or in Crusader Kings, or even Victoria. Bad historical accuracy can break that immersion and ruin that fun. But increasing historical accuracy does not just increase fun, or make the game inherently better. To demonstrate this point, let's get into a game that I personally have played way too much in my time, including both on Steam and, well, off Steam, back before Steam was a thing and I was still playing video games. Medieval 2 Total War. It's quite an older title, and while I think claims such as Universally Adored would be inaccurate, very few games are, it's still very much enjoyed. It is considered a pretty good game overall by a lot of people. My point is, overall, this game is considered a good game. May Lord have mercy upon us, this game is not historically accurate. What is going on when it comes to historical accuracy for this game? The Normans, who just conquered England because the start date is 1080, are referred to as England, which I guess is okay. But then we start going into things like France, which occupy really weird bits of France, and even though they have de facto and de jure control over France at this point, they're very decentralized. That's kind of represented here by some of the regions that they would have claimed being under control of rebels. But another better thing to bear in mind, there's a lot of something called rebel settlements, and these are settlements that are just not their own faction, but are in charge of just generic rebels. Which means, for example, from a gameplay point of view, the Irish and Welsh settlements are pretty much identical. They have their own little unique units inside specific areas, like the Welsh have Welsh noblemen guarding their own castles, and the Irish have Irish kerns. But again, every settlement that is not started by controlled by one of these factions you can see here is controlled by an arbitrary concept called rebels. Which is just... what? Then we see after England and France, we see a united Holy Roman Empire. Right at the game start is just united, but also not really united because it doesn't control a bunch of Holy Roman Empire territory. Like, the Holy Roman Empire is centralized and united, but also doesn't control Hamburg of all places? Really? Okay. We also see Spain, in 1080 mind you, Spain, and it even goes into detail here that any man born into the Iberian Peninsula can call himself a Spaniard, so that's why it's, they go into detail here. And I guess one of the big limitations of this game is you can't change your tag. You're always going to be Spain. You're never going to stop being Spain and become, you can't start as Castilian and become Spain. But just the concept of a Spain existing in this time period is, what? They have at least reasonable control of the starting land. I guess if you refer to this as Castile Leon. But either way, that's whatever. We have some, I guess, reasonable things in terms of the Venice, but again, not really represented trade posts and other things like that. Sicily, I guess, fair enough. You can have another Norman state that's around, so there's no complaints here. Milan. It should be just Genoa. And also, they should not own Genoa, but they do at the start. Milan just owned Genoa in 1080 AD. No. I guess it's a game balance thing, but also no. Like, they're also not even the most relevant power at this point. The other, I guess, rebel settlement here is also Florence, which does become more relevant later, but at this point, the relevant big power is Pisa, and that's just not represented here. Then we have Scotland, which just doesn't start with Inverness for some reason at this point as well, which... why? Like, were they worried about making Scotland too strong? Really? Okay. But even then, whatever, right? That's not too much to complain. Byzantium's not awful, but again, should start with a lot more territory, etc. Russia. In 1080. The game ends before Russia forms. And they also aren't Russia as in a Muscovy that then went on to form Russia. This is Novgorod. They start with Novgorod. They're trading on the Baltic Sea. They literally only have one settlement, Novgorod. What? Where? Historical immersion. Where? Then we have Moors, which are, I guess, kind of... but it's a weird faction. I mean, they're an enjoyable faction. I did a full map with them. But it's a very weird faction in that they have a very split identity. they're kind of being like another sultanate in the same way that the Turks and the Egyptians are, but also kind of desert focused. They have some desert units that are playing around that, and they're just a bit... I mean, calling them the Moors is also like referring to the Holy Roman Empires of the Germans. You have to refer to a specific caliphate that they were under. Not caliphate, the dynasty they were under, but... Just no. But I guess, again, historical accuracy aside. We then get the Turks, which kind of become the Ottomans. As you can see, they eventually get access to Janissary troops, which is fine and accurate, but also... I mean, I guess you can again call them the Turks, but no. Also, what is the starting provinces under control? I guess they're meant to represent a threat for Byzantium, but they should start with a lot less, especially in 1080. Why do they own... whatever, really. And then Egypt. This is the Mamluks. They literally recruit Mamluk units. It should not be called Egypt, but again, historical accuracy reasons. Then we get Denmark, which I guess fair, but then why not Sweden or Norway? And why, if it is, well, Denmark, does this Denmark not... Well, it's a Christian Denmark, but they have almost a Viking LARP set about them. Very... just... no. And we finally get to the greatest offender of this, Portugal. Why do they start with Navarra? They never had Navarra. What? Why? What's going on here? What? Okay. Anyway. Sorry, I have been just kind of complaining about the complete lack of historical accuracy. You get the point, there's a bit more than that. We get your Poland, you get your Hungary. Not that bad, etc., etc., but overall, this is not a great offset for a historical title when you have Milan running around with Genoa at game start, when you have Portugal owning Navarra, when you have whatever the hell is going on with the Turks and the Egyptians. I mean, again, other Total War games have made Egypt worse. They've sometimes just made Egypt like a Stone Age Egypt when it really wasn't in that period, and so on, when it was. But I digress. Let's not get into that whole can of worms. Point is, this is a good game. It's considered a good game by worldly people. Well, this is very much not historically accurate. And it's not just reflected by the game's starting position as well. It's also reflected by, well, almost the nature of the gameplay. Let's take a look at, for example, in our castle we're able to recruit something called mailed knights. These are meant to be heavy-hitting knights, and they are. That's the function they serve. These knights cost 680 to recruit, and they have a relatively expensive but still reasonable upkeep of 250. What that means is the best way to use your mailed knights is to recruit them and keep them around. There's not much point disbanding them to save money, because you're just going to end up recruiting them again later. You're getting standing armies in 1080. That's not how armies work. They're levy armies. The other thing with them, which I think is a great feature for this game, is there's a manpower system. When I recruit mailed knights, it's going to take me 5 turns until I recruit them again. Which again, kind of punishes the levy system, because I want to keep them around because I can't recruit more forever. However, this pool is really not that bad. You can very much work around it, and it just basically encourages you to build more stables and so on to be able to recruit and keep going. I believe this settlement already has stables constructed, but you get the point. It's not that bad though. 5 turns to recover it is not the end of the world. If you suicide your mailed knights away, you'll be able to get them in 5 turns. Not the collapse, not the end of all be all. It's not going to hurt you that much. But there we go. The other thing to also bear in mind is things like building a church that, do have an upfront cost to them, but don't have any maintenance costs associated with it. Not exactly very realistic in the sense that usually if you are doing that, it will just have maintenance costs associated with it. You need to upkeep your church and so on and so on. But again, you could even call this a small nitpick. Why am I mentioning these nitpicks? Well, because this game clearly has a lack of historical accuracy. So, surely a mod that massively focuses on historical accuracy will make this game a lot more, well, better, and therefore more fun. Because that's the goal of a game, to be fun. Let's talk about it. Here we are in Stainless Steel Historical Immersion Project 98. I believe that's the version of the mod in question. It's a submod for Stainless Steel, which is again a big overhaul from Medieval 2. And this part of this mod specifically focuses on, well, the Historical Immersion Project to optimize and aim for historical accuracy. How well do they do that? Well, if we pop into the early era campaign, and again, look at this very fancy selection screen, quite well. Portugal no longer starts owning, well, Navarra. This is actually called the Kingdom of Castile and Leon, and has a slightly more accurate holdings at the start. Aragon exists, which is a great step up, but a whole bunch of this land, as before, Portugal doesn't just own that at the start, is actually controlled by the Almoravids, aka the dynasty in charge at that point. France is a lot more decentralized, and that's reflected by the Kingdom of the Franks starting with a whole bunch of, well, settlements that are technically rebels, but outside of their control. There is a faction limit built into this game, which still forces them to use rebel settlements, but there's a lot more factions going on around. Scotland actually starts with Scotland. England is now the Kingdom of the English, but run by the Normans. The Holy Roman Empire is still united in this regard, but has, well, it's I believe in this mod space just considered the strongest faction, the easy mode, but starts with a lot more accurate control over what it controls. Venice has the city. Pisa also has, well, Pisa, but it's a little maritime republic, so I believe it has some island control. The Pope's the Pope. And Sicily is Norman Sicily, as I said before. There's your Hungary. There are a bit more accurate borders than before. There's your Serbia. There's your Roman Empire. There's your Sultanate of Rum, or basically Ottomans wannabes. Your Crusader state. This does start in 1132, so the Crusader states are already established. But then you still have the Fatimid Caliphates, aka the Mamluks. I mean, I believe I referred to Egypt as the Mamluks earlier. I can't remember when they became Egypt. Don't quote me on that. I'm not that great at historical accuracy, despite touting it. With that said, yeah, again, a lot more accurate. You've got the Zengid Empire, the Abbasids, Georgia running around, the Seljuk Empire. You've got the Cuman Khanate. You got the Kievan Rus instead of whatever was going on back then. You have Novgorod as an actual republic instead of, well, Russia. And Lithuania exists. And there's your Poland as well. You have your Denmark, which is a bit more accurate in its portrayal, as is Norway. And so apart from just getting a lot more stunning positions, a lot more well-accurate factions, one of the other things they do is they treat the time period as well, I guess more accurately. Let's explain what I mean by getting into the lobby. So here we are in the lobby, as mentioned before, looking very beautiful map and all that. Let's say we yet again go to our Paris, and we want to recruit these very nice mailed knights that we mentioned before. Now, they are going to be a lot cheaper to recruit, 471, but their upkeep is going to be crippling. 942 upkeep means that you're basically paying their total recruitment cost every turn that you have them in the field. Maintaining a standing army is expensive. Going on campaign, where you have to recruit soldiers and march to places with them, is expensive. It's going to cost you a lot of money, and that is very historically accurate for this time period. Because again, maintaining armies is expensive. This encourages you to actually disband them. But you have to be very strategic about it. Because, let's say I recruit these male knights, it's going to take me 19 turns before I recruit them again. This applies to other units as well. These guys, the sword-mailed foot knights, are going to take 19 turns, and even more levy troops, so for example spare militia, still take 8 turns to recover. This will be like 1 or 2 turns in the vanilla game, if that. And you'd have a lot more than just 1 available. What this means is that manpower is a very real concern in the sense that if you go on campaign, even if you have the money for it, it's not just trivial to replace your armies. Battles are expensive, they lose you men that take ages to replace. You have to be very conscious about taking battles. Furthermore, the reason I mentioned things like churches before that don't cost you any maintenance is, let's say I do want to build a small church. It's going to give me minus 50 income. It's going to cost me 50 income, 50 treasury, ducats, whatever you want to call them, a turn to maintain this small church, which makes sense. It's more realistic. Now, does that make this, well, better and more fun? If you're looking for a more historical experience, for sure you want to be playing this. But I have played this. I played this quite a bit. And is this more fun? Not really. And I might get crucified in the comments for this, but this is not inherently more fun. Because the optimal way of playing around in this campaign is the same way that medieval wars are actually fought. You avoid battle like the plague. Most things are siege warfare, where you march up to a castle and you starve them out because assaulting is expensive, so you don't get any fun, cool fights in that way. And the best way to defeat an enemy army is to, well, attrition them around on your land. Engage them slowly but surely, and instead of having glorious battles where you come up, to your enemies, there are even situations where you just walk up front, have a skirmisher phase where your, missile units fire off against the enemy missile units, and then they just kind of run back to the safety of their own lines. You kind of dance around for a while. And if you're forced to engage, okay, fine, you have your big battle, but those are really costly. So a lot of the time, you try to avoid that, like the plague. Which again, you're going to get a lot more in this historical immersion project. You're going to get a lot more plagues. I hope you enjoy. Populations don't just tend upwards for no reason. You have to really invest into farms and estates and other agricultural things, and actually invest into governors that are good, managing your governors and your people well, and your rulers to make sure they are good at, well, governing, to be able to succeed. Is this fun? It can be, but when you are here to play a Total War game, to fight big Total War battles, fight big sieges, etc., and you're actively punished for doing that, I'm gonna go with no. It depends on the kind of playstyle. If you want to be a hyper-aggressive, go conquer half the entire map with your glorious armies that ride into the sunset and fight big, epic, grandiose battles, you will be punished for that kind of playstyle, because it's not historically accurate. But that playstyle, where you're running around the map, conquering people and having big, glorious battles, is fun. And you're punishing a fun type of playstyle. This instead rewards the studious, accurate assessment of what buildings need to be built where, not building every single building not discriminately, and actually managing your country and economy well. Now, I'm a Paradox YouTuber and I'm a Paradox player. I definitely find that fun as well. But that's a very different type of fun, and that's not the fun I always expect when I'm opening up a video game. I also do want to just go have a big battle sometimes, and hence playing something like the Historical Immersion Project is going to be punishing me for doing that. So where am I going with this? Well, I mean, if you've been paying attention, you kind of get the point. Historical accuracy does not inherently equal more fun. It leads to a different experience, and you have to be careful to make sure you're not punishing fun gameplay by trying to stick to an arbitrary set of historical accuracy, right? They're not at the opposite end of the spectrum. You can be realistic and you can be fun. But inherently just making something more realistic does not inherently make it more fun as well. Anyway, I believe you got to the point now. You're a smart person. So with that all said and done, a like would really appreciate the video if you haven't already, and a subscription would be amazing. But with all that said and done, that's all I have time for today. Again, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.